Welcome everybody again. Good evening. Welcome to this panel discussion of the Rosa-Luxemburg-Stiftung with the title Keine Alternative zum Krieg, Militarismus und Militarisierung in Israel. In English, No Alternative to War, Militarism and Militarization in Israel. As said, my name is Gil Shochat. I'm currently the director of the Israel office of the Rosa-Luxemburg-Stiftung in Tel Aviv, and I have the honor of chairing this panel discussion tonight on the occasion of the publication of our new German language reader, which you were surely already able to see in the foyer. I would like to thank you for coming tonight, and I really think the three of us and everyone at the foundation here today is excited regarding the publication of this reader, which, as we sadly know, is as acute than ever. First and foremost, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our two panelists tonight, whom I will introduce more in depth in a few minutes. But please, first of all, welcome with a round of applause, Rela Mazali and Tali Konas. Unfortunately, Dunya Abbas, our third aspired panelist tonight, is not able to participate in the discussion, so we apologize already here for any inconvenience, but are nevertheless sure that tonight's discussion will be fruitful and insightful for our guests. We'll start just now. But before I give a brief introduction to tonight's topic, I would also like to thank all the colleagues who contributed to this new reader. First and foremost, Tali, sitting here, second to the right, who conceptualized and edited this publication, but also to our colleagues in Tel Aviv, Anay El-Kluk and Tamar Almog, as well as Noki Olchowski for the graphic design, our translator, Ursula Wokök-Wolin, for translation from Hebrew to German, and also the translation and editing collectives Gegensatz and Textarbeit for their tireless work on this publication in the last 1.5 years. So a great thank you from our side. A special thanks also goes out to the contributors to the reader, whom you can look up in the publication itself, but I would like to name them one by one because I really think each contribution is all-encompassing in itself. So first of all, Rela Mazali, who's sitting here next to me, Yossi Bartal, Maisa Irshaid, Yagil Levi, Michal Czernovitsky, Idit Zertal, Shlomo Svirsky, and Eti Konor Atias. So when they will hopefully see the recording of this event, they will also see that we thank them from the bottom of our heart. And obviously, this publication would not have been possible in this way without them. And maybe to give you a bit of a background to why we decided to work on this publication, it has been written by all of them are members of our local political network in Israel since the fall of 2023, since October 2023. The articles offer historical and current insights into the mechanism of the value system of militarism in Israel that pushes universal humanistic values to the margins, as we can all see in the last 1.5 years especially. One further request also regarding the conduct of tonight. So as I said, the event is being filmed by the camera standing here in front of us. The event recording of the panel discussion will be published in the next days on our Rosa-Luxemburg-Stiftung's website, and we kindly ask everyone here not to engage in any extra filming or recording of this event, and of course also not of participants in the crowd, so that we all feel safe to also voice our questions, voice our remarks in the course of the evening. So thank you also for keeping along with that. It is also very important for me, of course, to state tonight as a framing to the event that we are, of course, aware of the devastating circumstances in Israel and Palestine currently, under which this panel is taking place. After almost 2 months of a very fragile, temporary ceasefire deal, which saw the release of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners, as well as the gradual return of hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians to their largely destroyed communities in the Gaza Strip, the last 2 weeks have seen the devastating resumption of the destruction of the Gaza Strip and mass killings of Palestinians through Israeli bombardment, hunger, and lack of humanitarian aid. And although we all are in Israel, in Palestine, aware that words can actually not capture anymore the ongoing destruction and the feelings that we have towards the situation we are facing in Gaza, but of course also in the West Bank, where militant settlers are regularly engaging in pogroms against Palestinian communities under protection of the Israeli military, leading to more and more communities being cleansed from their land. It is nevertheless important for us to state that the most recent and current military assault of Israel against its neighbors following the October 7th massacre by Hamas is the hardest and longest since the founding of the State of Israel in 1948, Mazal Tov. An existential war that has cost the lives of, according to official figures, more than 1,200 Israelis, even more with people who have fallen in combat, but of course also more than 50,000 Palestinians, the majority of whom are women and children, leaving entire populations without protection or shelter for almost 1.5 years now. The Gaza Strip, should this ongoing assault stop at one stage, which we all hope, will be uninhabitable for years to come, and there are no current realistic prospects for how this should happen in a concrete and humane manner. And I think it's also important to state that these developments in the last 1.5 years have led renowned human rights organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, but also scholars of genocide studies such as Amos Goldberg and Omer Bartov, and various UN organizations to classify these acts as a genocide or at least genocidal acts against the Palestinian people in Gaza. Putting this into perspective, we of course know historically that in the nearly 77 years of its existence, the State of Israel has fought countless wars, as well as carried out a variety of military operations against what it classifies as its eternal enemies. Over the decades, the military capabilities and resources of the Israeli army have steadily increased, with territories of other states or populations being sometimes permanently occupied and or annexed multiple times, costing the lives of tens of thousands of people in Israel, Palestine, and also surrounding countries. But what lies behind these numbers? These are the questions we want to talk about today. What is the basis for the acceptance of an ongoing military logic in Israeli society? What are the self-images and self-justifications of the Israeli war society, a definition by the sociologist Meir Amor? In short, why does almost everyone go along with it? These are the questions we would like to grapple with tonight from different perspectives, sociologically, politically, economically, but also talk about maybe counter-strategies to this ongoing process, resistance from within to this militarism and militarization, which have always been present. And with Rela, tonight we have a long-standing champion of anti-militarism with us. So this is also one further reason why I'm very happy to have you with us tonight. The Israel office of the Rosa-Luxemburg-Stiftung works in the spirit of the anti-militarist ideals of our namesake closely with actors in Israel who do show and work on alternatives to the current unsustainable status quo and stand up for them. So we will take approximately 1 hour for the discussion on the panel between the three of us. Before we open the space for questions from the audience, there will be colleagues of mine running around with microphones and looking out for who wants to ask something or give a remark. But of course, I apologize beforehand if we should not be able to give everyone who wishes the opportunity to ask a question or make a remark, but we will have also the opportunity to continue the discussion after the event finishes. So now I have to go to my further notes. I'm very sorry for this, but I'll just be with you in 1 second. Okay. So now I would like to finally introduce our panelists tonight. I'll start with Tali Konas. Tali is a freelance translator from German to Hebrew. She has worked for many years as a project manager of the Israel office of the Rosa-Luxemburg-Stiftung in Tel Aviv. Since summer of 2023, she has been living in Berlin. From here, she edits the German language website of the RLS Israel office, which I recommend to everyone who wants to gain first-hand information of progressive struggles from within. And in this capacity, she's also been, that I mentioned before, the lead editor of our new reader. So please welcome Tali again. Thank you. And to my right is also Rela Mazali. Rela is a longtime Israeli peace activist and writer. Since 1980, she is an anti-militarist activist against Israel's militarization and military occupation. In 1998, she was one of the co-founders of the feminist movement New Profile, Profil Chadash in Hebrew, which opposes Israeli militarism and counsels draft resistors of all sorts. In 2010, she founded the Gun-Free Kitchen Tables project around disarmament and gun control in Israel. She has worked for Physicians for Human Rights Israel and was, among others, a consultant for the International Committee of the Red Cross, as well as a member of Academia for Equality, an organization working to promote democratization, equality, and access to higher education for all communities living in Israel. A warm welcome to you, Rela. Thank you for being with us. So now starting the discussion, Rela, I would like to start with you. You were one of the contributors to our new reader, and if I remember correctly, you were also involved through your contacts with Tali in adding or insisting on adding both the term militarism and militarization to the title of our reader. So I would like to ask you maybe to please start by explaining to us and the audience, of course, what the difference is in your eyes between militarism and militarization, and why these terms are so important for our understanding of the Israeli war society.
Thank you for having me and for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. And thank you all for attending this evening. I think militarism is something that is used quite frequently and easily understood to be an ideology and a cultural economic structure enabling a society to be prepared for and to participate in warfare. But militarization is important to point out as a separate idea, a separate concept, because it pinpoints the fact that in order to maintain militarism, a society has to go through a perpetual process. Militarization, the structure of the term, indicates that we're talking about a process, an ongoing process that enables a society to embrace and practice militarism. And militarization in a society that has been practicing warfare for, depending on how you count it, either almost 100 years or 77 years, is a key process, because soldiers, by and large, the people who engage in warfare, are a dispensable class. They're a dispensable class because their health and their lives and their mental health is considered legitimate currency in a state's attempt to achieve policy goals. And when that class, which is in general usually a specific, not small, but a specific age group, and usually mostly of men, is called upon generation after generation after generation to, and these have been many generations now, to forfeit its health and life and endanger itself as currency in the state's attempt to achieve particular policy goals, that group of people is being, in fact, devalued. They are being made to believe that their lives are cheaper, are the ones that can be used to pay for these achievements. Not only the actual soldiers, but the parents raising the young people who go into the military. And I'm not only talking about combat soldiers, because many people come out of the military scarred from other kinds of jobs and projects that they engage in. In getting families and parents and teachers and educators to convince generation after generation after generation that they are obliged to do this, and that if they personally don't do it one by one, each one of them, the society they live in will perish. That requires a process of militarization. And the militarization happens through many, many different complementary channels. You can take a look at the photos, the photo montage in the middle of the collection. Street signs, soldiers coming to kindergartens with their guns in order to excite 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds to make them feel that, wow, this is where I want to go. This is really cool. A whole array of different, what the education system teaches, what it doesn't teach, what it omits. All of that pours into militarization that obscures the devaluation of lives, the consistent devaluation of lives.
Could you maybe give us some more examples, specific examples from different spheres of Israeli society? So I know, for example, that we as RLS worked with New Profile on a study researching the influence of the military on academia. There are similar studies regarding the influence of the military on or militarization on the health sector. So maybe could you give us a bit of more insights into the work New Profile is doing in this respect?
New Profile has been looking for many years at the ways in which militarization occurs and trying to uncover them, to open them up to scrutiny. Just a small example, many years ago, a group of us tried to challenge the fact that kindergarten children and school children every year are instructed and led in sending care packages to soldiers and writing them letters of admiration. And when we very gently, some of the mothers in this group suggested to some teachers and some schools that maybe along with soldiers, we should also send letters to kids who are hospitalized, to doctors, to other people who are serving their society in different ways. There was a very strong backlash. But what New Profile looks at is collecting artifacts of all areas of Hebrew-Israeli culture, and deciphering the fact that, in fact, they are participating in the process of militarizing. For instance, many advertisements take advantage of the cool soldier image in order to sell something. So they are, on the one hand, selling something, but at the same time, the subtext is that they are selling being a cool soldier, and making it seem desirable and exciting and fun. The study that is not yet published but should be published very soon, that New Profile did, specifically Nisi Peli mostly worked on, with Tamar, I should say, and really thanks to her, is a deep probe, but only a first one, into how academia in Israel is soaked with military outlooks, military funding, military collaborations. I don't know if you're aware, but currently university campuses in Israel, many of them, or most of them, are full of soldiers walking around with their guns, who are doing special educational programs at the university, with the military paying the university very well for this. And the university campuses often look kind of like barracks.
I can totally, second what you're saying, especially since October 7th, university campuses have, which, if I'm not mistaken, were previously spaces that were where guns were not allowed or where arms were not allowed, at least not. Yeah, but at least since October 7th, I mean, it's been inflationary in the Israeli street scenes overall, in Israeli cities, on playgrounds, but of course also in universities, causing many students, specifically Palestinian students in Israeli universities or Palestinian citizens of Israel who study in Israeli universities, to feel very unsafe and intimidated, obviously, by the presence of guns. And I think we'll come to this difference in perspective in the wake of the debate. So Tali, I would like to maybe ask you, as let's say the lead editor, who came up with this idea for the publication very soon after the massacre of 7th of October. We were discussing how we can respond. As the Israel office, of course, we have the specific task of educating on dynamics that happen inside Israel in the borders of 1948. So we were thinking of a joint angle, I would say, that would kind of give a progressive perspective on the developments that were happening, but having an internal Israeli perspective nonetheless. But could you give us a bit more context on why you thought this reader was important, and maybe also, besides the obvious reasons being the current assault against Gaza, but also why you thought this was so important for a German language audience, and maybe also what you learned in the course of assembling this reader.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Actually, the idea to make a series of articles about militarism in Israel started 2 years ago.
Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the idea to publish a series of articles about militarism in Israel was conceived about 2 years ago, because when I was still living in Israel, because it was clear for everybody that lives in Israel that it was always there, but it escalates, and there was a feeling in the air that it becomes something very central, and I think the team also in the office discussed this, and we wanted to do something about it, but things kept happening all the time. You had so many developments that you couldn't come to the more to the analysis part of the work. And then came October 7th, and it was more relevant than ever. And there were two factors, I think, that made it so made it look important. First of all, the discourse in Israel, which immediately after the 7th of October became even more militaristic than it was before. It reached high pitches. And I was living here, but I heard from the office, I heard from people in Israel, I saw pictures, I saw the articles in the newspaper, everything was about that. And in the very first, in the beginning of the war, there were very few people who raised their voices against war, or even doubted the current development, the Israeli attack on Gaza. It was very clear that even the left voices that were very clear before took a step back, and in this atmosphere, the militaristic discourse flourished and became very violent. The second factor is that living in Berlin, I spoke with a lot of people here that are very interested and that are educated and know and have been to Israel. And again, in the beginning of the war, it was almost unanimous that this war is justified, that with also the German commitment to Israel, it was the bon ton to say that Israel has the right to defend itself. And of course, it's true. But my question, knowing both words, was like, is this defense? Is what Israel is doing now defense? Because this is the narrative, this is what we've been told all the years. We defend the existence of Israel. But basically, this narrative just collapsed with the 7th of October. It just proved wrong, because all this militarism, all this money, all those people, they were all serving the goal of securing Israel and securing Israeli citizens, protecting them. And in real time, it didn't happen. So I found myself trying to explain to German friends and colleagues why maybe we should think differently about this, why there is a space for criticism on this, while Germans found it very hard to criticize Israel in this point of time. And I figured out that what was missing was some good information, good organized information by experts that have analyzed, have researched this topic for years, like Rela, like all the other authors in this booklet. And I couldn't find any place where it was all compiled. And then we spoke about it and thought this would be a good idea. As we went along with this idea, I discovered that also Israelis don't know much about it. And well, in my milieu, I would say like more of a leftist milieu, everybody felt that it was wrong, but was lacking the information and lacking the historical perspective on what is going on and how to explain why we criticize Israel for what it is doing in Gaza. You have some more parts to your question?
No, I think we can continue from there. Thank you. I would like maybe to take this topic of self-defense and expand it a bit more with you, Rela. When we prepared the discussion, we talked about the relationship between Israeli militarism and Israeli colonial policies or colonialism. I would like to remind everyone that on the day of the 7th of October massacres, it was, if I'm not mistaken, a fact that several army battalions who were normally serving in the south of Israel, of proper Israel in 1948's borders, were relocated to the occupied West Bank, where they were sent to guard militant settlers who were celebrating the holiday of Sukkot near the Palestinian village of Hawara. So basically leaving the south of Israel, which was then overrun, exposed. So I would like maybe to pick up on that and ask you, Rilef, that you also worked on this topic, the connection between colonialism and militarism, and how this basically counters this idea of self-defense, which is still very prevalent when you listen to Israeli media, let's say, that kind of bring impressions from soldiers who describe their service. Also now what they were doing in Gaza, they all frame it as self-defense, defending the homeland, but not only you, but also you develop another approach to this, so please expand.
First, I'll am I okay? Yeah, I'll comment on the fact that I think it's really clear that Israel is not more secure now after a year and a half of genocidal war in Gaza and spreading to the West Bank, and another version of it inside Israel against Palestinian citizens, which we'll touch on later maybe. It's not more secure than it was before. So this very obviously isn't making the country more secure. And it's not about making the country more secure. In fact, that is part of the militarizing of minds and of culture and of schools and parents and getting them to join and engage and enlist in this process and believe in it. And but in fact, for a long time now, and maybe from the beginning, I won't go into the whole history, it has been about appropriating resources, appropriating land, first of all, taking over resources and controlling them. And appropriating land also means appropriating the people on that land, whether you want to or not. This is very obviously what has driven Israel's policies for many years now. It's no coincidence that Israel has no agreed borders. It doesn't have clear borders. It has not agreed to draw those borders for many years. And that is because it continues to expand. Now it's in Syria, if you don't know. Maybe many of you already know this. It's also, again, in Lebanon, bombing, fighting, colonial processes are almost, I think, invariably militarized because they are about taking over the resources of a native population and controlling it, and sometimes ethnically cleansing that population, sometimes oppressing them, sometimes a combination of both. This is what Israel has been doing for many years. And this is not about self-defense. It is about expansion and control. But since militarization succeeds in instilling an image of the person, the native, who we are taking over resources from, as the dangerous enemy, and really very deeply embedding that in consciousness of most Jewish Israelis, and not knowing the language and not having shared easy communication, and geographically being separated throughout most of the country and beyond it, then all of this isn't obvious to the people who are told that there is a evil ruthless, cruel enemy, and yes, sometimes they are an evil, ruthless, cruel enemy. But the people who live through that image and agree to go on upholding warfare and extending it.
One of the major pillars of the Israeli system of militarization, militarism, and why it persists generation after generation is the fact that also military conscription is mandatory for all Israeli, or for most Israeli citizens. Maybe we can talk a bit about this, why this isn't as precise maybe. But generally the Jewish Israeli population does go to the army at the age of 18. Men for 3 years, women for 2 years. I would first of all maybe ask you, Tali, what does this mean for you, or how did it play for you, this fact in your daily life growing up in Israel? What does this mean for how Israeli society functions, that you know that you will enlist to the army, most probably, and that you have to actively oppose it if you don't want to? Maybe then also talk about groups also in Jewish Israeli society who do not enlist to the army. There's like one specific group, I think, that we should talk about, mainly being ultra-Orthodox society. But maybe first of all, start with the first question, please.
So I would like to add to what Rella said, that on top of all of that, we have a society in Israel that is so absorbed by the militaristic discourse that we do not recognize anymore what a civil society is. And you just said that at the age of 18, people are recruited to the army. And I was thinking, actually, the minute they are born, they're recruited to the army in many, many ways. So I can give a few examples. I hope there are not too many Israelis in the audience, because all Israelis know that, but maybe for Germans it's not so known. So it begins with kindergarten. We have in the photos by New Profile a photo of very cute paper tanks that were made by kindergarten children, probably for Independence Day or something like that. They were painted in nice colors and all that. This is something that is abnormal for me, but it's completely normal for the children, of course, for their parents, for their teachers. And then it goes on with hearing my grandmother telling my brother, who was then maybe 7 or 8, that he has to eat up everything from his plate, because how otherwise would he grow up and be a strong soldier? So it's like really putting it already in his mind. And then, of course, there are all the ceremonies, all the parades, the films, the songs that we sing, that we hear constantly in the radio, that depict the wars. And then at the age of 16 and a half, you get your first summon for the army. And you're still in a system, you're still in school. Adults tell you what to do. You don't really have the option to think independently at this age. And you just do what you're told. You go there, and the age of 18 seems so far away also. So this is like another stage of being an Israeli, is, going to school, going to high school, going to the army. Maybe in Europe it's going to university. This is like one stage of becoming an adult. And of course, before you have at high school, for girls, for example, you have the idea of having a soldier boyfriend, which means like, which represents everything that an adult actually, that finished school and now has uniform and has weapon and has some, and have some strengths and capacity to do things in the world. But this is a part of the way you think. It's very hard to think individually and look at it from the outside. So then comes the age of 18, and it might be possible that you don't want to go to the army, that you feel that it's not something you want to do. You can't really explain it because everybody's been doing it all the time. If you're not accompanied by a new profile, and but you still go because it's too much of a hassle to try to be exempted from the army. And you go there and you might also feel that this is wrong, that something does not feel right, that it's not what you've been told, but you just keep doing it because also the society tells you that you won't find any job, nobody will want to work with you, that it's a great shame not to go to the army because this is your contribution to society, although there are many other ways to contribute to society. And I'm just depicting this to make it more understandable how hard it is to take a step back and to think about it in another way. So I think that most of the people that took this step back did it after their service, after they served in the army, because this is already an age where you can start thinking for yourself, and also, yes, because it's done. Only after you're under this machine, under this mechanism, when you're under it, you cannot really think differently. After that, you can start develop your own thoughts.
I would maybe like to follow up and ask Rela, because as we mentioned, New Profile does counsel all those who refuse to be enlisted or do not, or try to not openly refuse, because refusal also in Israel is punished with jail sentence in most cases. But I would like to hear from you on your support network for those who do take these decisions, and there always has been, and there's also an article in the Reader talking about consent or subjection as also an integral part of Israeli anti-militarism. So there always were refusers, open refusers, and Rela, as you've been working with these refusers since the 1990s at least, I would like to hear from you how this work looks, and maybe if you could share with us also the reasons that these refusers share with you and what this means for them also in society.
First of all, I want to say that the common knowledge is that everybody goes, but that's not the reality. That's not the reality, and I'm not referring right now to the Orthodox Jews. I'm referring to secular Jews or Jews that are called up to the military. The numbers of people complying with the draft have been going down steadily for over 20 years. Steadily, not very fast, but steadily, and that says a lot. And the numbers of people getting out of the military, deciding that they've had enough somewhere along during their service, are also growing. As New Profile, we don't collect numbers. We don't collect data, personal data on people. We accompany people who have made a decision that they don't want to enlist or that they no longer want to serve. And we give them information that is difficult to get. It's legal information. It's information that points out the different options for for realizing their decision, but it's not information that is readily available to anybody. It's not collected anywhere. The military makes it difficult to get this information, and also changes regulations as it goes along all the time, so it's hard to keep up. It's very unlike Germany in that sense. There's no simple way to come and tell the army, I don't want to enlist, I'll do alternative service or civilian service. I think that's an obligation here, right? If you don't, I'm not sure. Anyway.
But now there are discussions in Germany on reinstating military conscription. It was abolished in 2011. So military service is no longer mandatory in Germany, or civilian service. But I mean, everyone who's following German politics in recent years knows that talks about militarization in Germany, of course, very, very strong. But yes, just to contextualize.
So in Israel, there's no clear path to opting out of service. And New Profile accompanies the people that have made that decision, and some of the people, because the numbers are big, and the people who reach out to us are limited. Not everybody knows about us. Some people hear through other people. It's a network of learning your rights, your legal rights, and how you can realize this decision. So no, not everybody goes, but the common knowledge, particularly among, I would say, secular middle class Ashkenazi Israelis, is that everybody goes and everybody does their role, fulfills their role. And that perception is part of what the military succeeds and the state succeeds in embedding in people's minds. I remember about a decade ago, a university professor talking about the mandatory conscription at a conference, and saying that the army every year recruits back then. I think it was, I don't remember the number, but thousands of people that it doesn't really need. And they don't have roles, good, important roles in the military. But it still opts for recruiting them rather than, for instance, shifting to professional army or canceling the obligatory draft because it's cheaper. Because it's cheaper to recruit by law through mandatory service than it is to pay a professional army, or to pay people enough money so that they will have an interest in serving, which, by the way, is changing today somewhat under the radar, but maybe we'll get to that later. That is part of what I've been saying before. Their lives are devalued. They are cheaper at age 18. The possible loss of their lives and health is less costly to society, not to their families, less costly than the other options. But militarization of consciousness really does a good job in what Tali described, really does a good job in obscuring that and blocking people from realizing that this is the situation.
Mentioning economic questions, I think I would like to add that Israeli expenses for military and security, as they put it, is I think almost 12 to 14% of the overall state budget. So really very high number.
23%.
Even 23%. So maybe this is a development that I missed. But yes, I mean the current state budget of 2025 was released or decided upon last week. and saw a further expansion of the military spending. I think the amount of spending compared to the gross GDP is, I think, over 4%. If we look at Germany, which is still under 2%, so I think it's compared to the other OECD countries, the amount of spending as part of the gross GDP is the highest in Israel. So speaking, and this money, of course, does not go to essential social services, to the education sector, to those who need it most in Israel, where there's, of course, a huge social disparity between the populations and in favor of military spending. But I would like to maybe also talk about a part of Israeli society that we haven't talked about yet, namely being the Palestinian citizens of Israel, so-called 48 Palestinians. So Rela, besides your work for New Profile, you also founded the Gun-Free Kitchen Tables Coalition, which is working around the issue of gun violence in Israeli society, which is an endemic issue, specifically in the last decade, but also before. And it mostly affects Palestinian citizens of Israel who die from gun violence. So, for example, in 2024, 237 Palestinian citizens of Israel lost their lives due to gun violence. And between 2014 and 2023, more than 1,048 Palestinians were shot dead in what is mostly ascribed to so-called organized crime. But I would like maybe to ask you to give us a bit of a context to this phenomenon, which is widely portrayed in Israeli media as internal feuds of Palestinian criminal gangs. But as you already showed with your work, this has, of course, a connection to the Israeli military system. So please expand a bit on that.
So Gun-Free Kitchen Tables is a coalition of 20 civil society organizations, a feminist coalition. And I'll start by saying that guns, small arms, firearms, are the hardware of militarization. They are the daily tool that militarization uses to exert control over populations, over groups, over individuals, if it's sometimes in a home, particularly, not only, but particularly against women. They are a mechanism or a material expression of militarization. And part of what, I don't know how many of you are aware, but in parallel with what's happened after October 7th, there has been in Israel a very aggressive drive of mass civilian armament, led by Itamar Ben-Gvir as the Minister of, he calls it national security. It was formerly called public security, but that's his labeling. The very extreme far-right minister who is leading an aggressive campaign to arm citizens. Tali was talking before about the fact, or maybe it was you, Gil, I'm not, sorry if I mixed up the two. The fact that the southern kibbutzim and townships like Ofakim were left without protection on October 7th, 23. And the government's response to that has been a radical privatization of public security. They're saying, get a gun, protect yourself and your family. That's what they're saying, literally. We can't put soldiers and security guards everywhere. We're handing out guns. This is your chance, get a gun. You can protect yourself. A totally Wild West scenario. This is just these past 2 years. It actually started before under a different minister, but it's been very aggressive and very fast in these past 2 years. The guns that are collected in criminal groups in Palestinian society inside Israel are largely stolen from licensed sources, from illegal guns stolen from licensed sources, many of them from the army. The army bases, particularly, but not only in the Negev, have vast perimeters. They aren't well guarded. And again, there are cases of breaking in and stealing all kinds of weapons and a lot of ammunition, like hundreds of thousands of bullets in a year. And this mostly is going into the store of illegal, so-called illegal or unregistered firearms. And couple this with the fact that enforcement, police enforcement in Palestinian society inside 48 has been very selective, has been very discriminatory and selective. So, for instance, in 2021, when there were demonstrations all over the country in support of the protests at Al-Aqsa Mosque and what was going on in Gaza, thousands of Palestinian citizens were arrested, but very few, relatively very few Palestinian citizens are caught on criminal charges and on murder charges. The police just doesn't invest in that area of enforcement, and it hasn't for decades. So these communities are now full of guns in the hands of criminal groups. I know I have good friends who are afraid to travel particular roads in major Palestinian towns because it's too dangerous, because there are shootings there every day. There's no state investment or interest in stopping this process. So this is one aspect of militarization kind of seeping into Palestinian society inside Israel.
And I think that this aspect of militarization and its materialization, the fact that it's not countered by the same police forces which have no problem in dispersing any sort of peaceful demonstration against eternal war, this is all connected to the very strong dehumanization of Palestinians inside Israel in 48, but obviously also, of course, in Gaza and in the West Bank, basically labeling Palestinians as the eternal enemy from within, which also does not deserve the security it does, of course, deserve also as citizens of Israel inside the country. I would like to ask you, Tali, as someone who grew up in, let's say, mainstream Jewish Israeli society, how did this notion of this dehumanizing notion of the eternal enemy from within and also the enemy from the outside, it's a combination of both, how did it materialize in your daily life, and how did it impact the discourse that you were basically exposed to? And maybe also a bit about the process of unlearning this notion, which is induced, as we know, on a daily level from a young age.
First of all, I would like to go back on your question about the Orthodox society that I didn't answer, and I think it's a good connection also with what Rella said, because Palestinian society and Orthodox society are pretty much, I don't know, Palestinians are 20%, Orthodox are 17 maybe, or 14, I don't remember right now. But those are the major groups that do not serve in the army. And this is also why in this booklet we have an article written by a Palestinian activist and lawyer about the way militarism influences the Palestinian society, as Rella just described, and also an article that we thought was very important to include by a leading, by a dominant leader of the religious left in Israel. There is such a thing. And who wrote about, she is an activist against militarism, but also an Orthodox woman who is still practicing, who still belongs, sees herself as belonging to the Orthodox society. And it was hard to find someone to write it, but it was important because of the following reasons. Because it seems that in Israeli society, but also in European society, it is a maxim. It's like obvious that Orthodox people should also enlist, should also serve in the army. It's not fair, they're not sharing, they're not paying the price that other citizens of this country pay. And it's been a huge discussion in last years, also following the law of recruitment, which is interesting to say because both Palestinians and Orthodox are not legally exempted from the army. There is no law that says that they can be exempted from the army, but there is a silent agreement that they will not, of course, for different reasons. And for me, the question whether Orthodox people should serve in the army or not was entirely not the right question. It was a way to bypass the more crucial question of why do we need more and more soldiers? Why do we need more people to serve in the army? Why are we willing to send people to die? And our reaction is, yes, we want your sons to die too, because this is fair. Why can we not think about an alternative way of treating it? And I think this article represents this notion well.
Before I come back to the thank you to the former question that I asked you, I want to add something. I think it was in the course of last year, protests. There are protests in Jewish Orthodox towns like Bnei Brak, outside of Tel Aviv, of secular protesters who, on the one hand, protest Netanyahu's government for example, exempting Orthodox Jews from military service, but at the same time stage these protests in ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods. And when you said, why do they not send them to die also, there was one protest that actually brought fake coffins to these societies, symbolizing that these Orthodox groups should also pay their share of coffins. And this was seen as a legitimate form of actually saying you also have to serve, which just shows to what points this can go. But I would, before maybe then also open the floor for questions from the audience, maybe go back to the question of dehumanization, and wrap up with that before we open for the crowd. And maybe Rela has something to add.
I think Rela says it also in her article. She begins her article with the fact that she sat with her daughter's 4-year-old in a bus or in a train, and there was a soldier next to them with his gun, and your daughter asks you something about it and was a bit afraid maybe of it, and you realize that you didn't see it. And this is an experience that all Israelis, most of Israelis have in daily life. We see soldiers, we see their guns, we listen to the news about the wars, and we do not think about it as something that is abnormal. So it's when discussing this with Palestinian friends and colleagues, for me it was the first time in the office that I discussed it with Palestinians. It is amazing to discover that what I conceive, if I conceive it, I conceive as something that protects me, something that is there as part of my society and is totally justified, is actually for other citizens of the same country where I live a threat. This is something that they have to grow up with, knowing that this weapon is pointed against them and not to protect them. And I've heard all kind of stories. Maybe later in the questions I can repeat them. But this is another perspective that Israelis are not always aware of, I think. Like growing up as a citizen in a country where you are seen as enemy.
I just want to point out that warfare is a choice. It's a policy choice. We don't usually think of it as that, and a very central part of militarization in Israel is convincing people that there is no other choice. You hear it all the time, every day. En brera. It's one of the most common phrases in Hebrew, and it's unquestioned. But if you look at the past 2 years in Israel, Palestine, there are 2 borders that have been quiet and secure. Those are the borders with Egypt and with Jordan. Those are the borders where Israel has agreements, peace agreements. The Egyptians may not love Israelis. It's not a so-called warm peace. The Jordanians definitely don't, even though lots of Israelis have traveled there and back. But those borders were kept quiet and secure. But that policy choice has not been made along other tracts of land. So the whole concept of there's no other choice and that's why we have to sacrifice lives isn't questioned, isn't looked at critically, isn't it's like you grow up with a belief in this truism. And most people don't realize that you can actually, as Tali called it, take a step back and ask you, really? There's no other choice?
So I would like to thank Yorel and Tali up until here.